as far as Soja went, we kind of just we love to play music. That was what we like to do, and over the I guess the course of this road we've been on, this ride as you're calling it, we kind of figured out something that we do that not a lot of bands do. And once I figured that out, it's been pretty automatic since then.
Yeah, you mentioned your dad. I read an interesting story. Your dad, if I'm correct, was an economist, worked for the U.S. government, and was stationed in Liberia, which is in Africa, back in the mid 80s. And there was a whole hoo-ha down there where there was a takeover and so forth. And it had, I read where it had a real impact on your life there, this attack on the embassy. Talk about that if you would.
Yeah, we were the way it works over there. It's kind of crazy. There's a bunch of I lived in a place called Monrovia, Liberia. So Liberia, like most countries in Africa, is created by someone who's not from there. The borders are drawn by somebody who's not from there, and the rules are picked by somebody who's not from there. But on top of all that, that was actually the place where James Monroe sent ex-slaves back, and those guys kind of went back and took over. The capital is James Monrovia, right? Monrovia, and Liberia, I guess Liberty, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But the plan didn't work. It was just a bunch of guys who had already seen how to enslave a whole race of people by coming over to the States, going back and then using what they learned. So it's a tough situation there, but they're actually doing a lot better now. They have a Nobel Peace Prize winning president, and she's a woman, which in West Africa is kind of shocking, but she's amazing and she's changing a lot. But yeah, Samuel Doe took over while we were there, and we all had to hide in bathtubs for a couple of days. It was kind of crazy.
Later on, you came back to the States, from what I can gather. You hooked up with one of your buddies, and you guys started this love affair with reggae music. And it seems like how those two events were connected. You're a big Bob Marley fan. Talk about how you became attracted to reggae music.
My dad thinks it's because of Africa, maybe, or because of I've lived in a bunch of different kinds of environments. There was Africa, and then there was a very poor neighborhood in the United States, and then a very, I guess not very, but a rich neighborhood in the United States. And I've kind of spent my life kind of looking at all sides of this thing, and it really has mattered a lot to me to include everyone when I'm talking. And so I guess that kind of maybe comes through in reggae music. Reggae music, at least Bob Marley kind of reggae music, was about including everybody and speaking to the world at large. And he had a gift for that like no one, I think, ever before him or ever after him. I mean, anywhere I go in the world, and I go a lot of places, that guy is the symbol for freedom. And it's not because of his beliefs, in my opinion. It's because of the way he could connect with human beings and what he evoked inside of all of us. And he kind of leveled the playing field, made us equal. So that's what I loved about reggae was Bob Marley, was his ability to do that. And that's something I've always cared about.
I thought it was also interesting, I read, where you're a big Paul Simon fan. You get a bit of a storyteller about you in your writing style, from what I can reckon. Paul Simon, how did he get in the mix? I wouldn't have expected that.
My dad.
Dad.
Yeah, it was, that's the music that we were raised on. And when we moved to Africa is right when he put out that album with Ladysmith Black Mambazo on it, and did Under African Skies and all those awesome songs. And I thought, I was only 6, so I think in my head I kind of thought that my dad knew Paul Simon, and that like he had made us an album to go live in Africa with, because it was like a Paul Simon album but African. But I loved him ever since, and there came a time when I stopped listening to him. There comes a point in your life where you stop listening to your father's music based on the fact only that it's your father's music.
Yeah.
And I would start listening to all this other stuff, and then we got into reggae, and then I started writing songs. And I never really knew like my songwriting style as far as like how I craft a song. And then I just downloaded a Paul Simon, like a greatest hits on iTunes, just because I was like, You go listen to, you know, what I heard when I was a kid, and it was like, holy crap, dude, I write like this guy. I mean, not like I write like him. That's a pretty bold thing to say that you write like Paul Simon, but I attempt to write songs like his, I think.
Yeah. We got a question.
So,
Okay, excuse me. Sorry for interrupting.
no, go ahead. Well, I kind of at that point went back and listened to every Paul Simon song and tried to see if there were any connections or similarities.
Yeah, I think it all kind of seeps into you, you know, very insidiously. We got a question, speaking of your writing style. We've got a gentleman on the phone by the name of Cameron from Minneapolis, Minnesota, who has a question for you about your writing style. Take it away. Cameron, nice to meet you.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
You're on with Jacob Hemphill.
I was wondering, like, when writing your music, obviously, like, emotion and staying true to the lyrics is a lot, but I've always struggled, and my other songwriter in my band, we've always struggled a little bit with rhyming versus non-rhyming. Like, one of us thinks rhyme scheme is very important, and then the other one's not so sure. So I just wanted to get maybe your thoughts on how important rhyming is.
That's a good question. I'd say that the first thing, well, this stuff is all objective, you know. I mean, subjective. This is my experience is going to be different than yours. And that's kind of what music is. There's no formula. I mean, there's a formula to music on the radio, but music off the radio isn't really supposed to be that formulaic. So, to me personally, I don't really care too much if it rhymes because I know that what I'm saying in the song is the most important thing. But that being said, I always make sure it rhymes in the end. Basically, when I'm writing it, I don't care about rhyming. It doesn't really fucking matter. And then later, you go back and you kind of just tidy it up and make sure everything. And it's not just rhyming. I mean, it's delivery, it's rhythm, it's, you know, getting all that stuff right. That's in order for people to hear your message, you got to dress it up. But I'd say rhyming's part of the dress up period.
All right, that answer your question there, Cameron?
Yeah, that was good.
All right, Cameron, I want you to give our guys your address there. We're going to send you one of these Fuck the Gatekeeper shirts for being bold and jumping in there. Thanks a lot, Cameron. Nice having you on the show today.
Yeah.
Perfect. Jacob, I read a quote from you, speaking of your writing style and so forth. The quote was, pop music, especially American pop music, is about having money, sleeping with models, living in mansions, spending all of our time in clubs, and generally being better than everybody in the rest of the world. You said we sing about different things that actually matter. Talk about that, if you would. That's
Sure.
Duke.
Music goes through cycles, you know. When rock and roll came around, it got greater and greater and greater. But as it gets greater, people realize how much money can be made. And then it always gets to a point of excess, which in rock and roll was the hair bands. You know, it was Warrant Cherry Pie, and it was girls, 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 and it was stretch limousines with pools in the back and dudes with, you know, wigs on and red leather boots. And then, you know, Kurt Cobain comes along and he doesn't say fuck this shit. He just puts out a record that basically says fuck this shit in so many words. And I think that's what's happening in music right now. You know, some hip hop guy or some pop guy is gonna come out and just have the greatest record anybody's ever heard. But yeah, if you turn on, I mean, I remember hip hop when I was a kid. It was all about who was smarter, who was more intelligent, who had the more clever shit. And now it's about, kind of sounds like it's about who's dumber.
Yeah.
Which is weird because it's the total opposite. But it's the same. I mean, it happens in rock and roll. It's going to happen in hip hop. It'll happen in pop. But what we try to do is make music that is made without a financial consequence. It's like what they were doing in the 60s and 70s. They were really trying to change the world. And what was popular was bands trying to change the world. So those are the bands who would become huge. And what wasn't popular is a bunch of fake shit. And, you know, that always changes in cycles, but I think we're on the upswing of a generation that's sick of the radio, can't relate to the radio. Girlfriend a bitch and sell drugs in your community. You can't really relate to the radio.
Yeah.
We're trying to be something people can relate to.
I'm happy to see a little return to that myself, even if it's a bit old school. We got another question here from the chat room. Cody, take it away.
Okay, we have our member Warrior. He says that you write very strong lyrics on your album, like maybe we were all his kids and he's up there, maybe he loves us. But he says both times he's seen you live, you say she. Is there any way that you can talk a little bit about that?
These are good questions, man. When I realized I should have written something differently, I changed it at the live shows. So whenever you hear me say, I do the same thing in Strength to Survive. I say it's getting hotter every year, stuck in the revolving door, wildfire, caught in our race for sure. The hotter every year and the wildfire aren't on the record, but they're live because the United States set over 3,000 heat index records last summer alone. So that means 3,000 times in 3,000 places last summer was hotter than it's ever been on record, the entire history, like written history of us here in America. And that's not right. And what that means is that wildfire is going to burn out of control, which it did all over Colorado all summer. My uncle lived 30 minutes away, and he said every morning in his ceiling was smoke. And so I changed the lyrics in Strength to Survive to kind of draw attention to the heat index and to wildfire. And also I love Game of Thrones, and they say wildfire all the time in Game of Thrones. No, that has nothing to do with it. But I changed the stuff. So yeah, in that song when I say he loves us and he's up there, I'm trying to do something that is normally taboo, which is to say God probably is a girl. And it doesn't say that in any of the Bibles because the Bibles are obviously written by men. They didn't used to let women, read or write, so women couldn't write the Bible. But when you think about it, I mean, why would a man create this earth? This earth is beautiful. Like, men normally create destruction. Women create beautiful things. Women are the ones who make children. And, you've seen a baby, they're pretty damn beautiful. So it's just a way for me to, nod to the chicks in the audience, A. B, change my lyric to make it, in my opinion, more accurate. And C, to say fuck you to the Bible.
Nice. We got another question about songwriting on the phone today. But I got to tell you, Jake, we got a lively bunch out here. You got them all to move from the back of the class to the front. Who do we have on the phone, Joe?
We got Taylor from Nebraska.
We got Taylor from Nebraska from the Heartline. Taylor, thanks for joining us.
Yes, thanks for having me.
What's your question for Mr. Hemphill here?
Well, kind of related to that same thing, when we were younger, I was kind of getting on those lines. Who you looked up to exactly, God, what was your belief, and pretty much how you developed that song.
In the song When We Were Younger?
Yes, when we were younger.
When We Were Younger has 3 parts. It's 3 verses, right? And each chorus is a resolution. So the first verse is, why are we here? What's the purpose of life?
Yes.
The second verse is, where do we go when we die? And the third verse is, does true love exist? And why do I write all these songs? So those are the 4, 3 big questions in life, right? Why am I here? Where do I go when I die? And do I have a purpose in love? Like, do I have this person out there waiting for me like all the movies tell me I do? And then in each chorus I say, but when we were younger, I had the answers. So the idea of that song is that part of life is realizing you don't know shit. When you're a kid, you're supposed to know you know everything because it's part of forming who you are. You're supposed to be very opinionated about things. But when you get a little older, you realize the dumb people are the ones who still swear that they know all the answers to everything. And the smart people kind of look around and go, shit, I don't really know. Maybe the point of this whole life is trying to figure it out instead of pretending that I know. When people talk to me and say things that answer these questions for me, I know they're lying to me because they don't know the answers to those questions. They might figure out if love exists because they might fall in love, deep love with a girl and have a beautiful family. But why are we here and where do we go when we die? There's no baby that's ever gone back into the womb and told all the other babies that this earth is beautiful. Same way that there's no one who's ever come and told me, listen, you know, where you're going is beautiful, unless it's in my own heart, in my own mind, but that's not something I can tell other people. So that whole song is trying to get people to be open and objective and accept other cultures and other people and other everything, because the point is we're all asking the same big questions.
Great. Good stuff. I hope that answers your question. I want to thank you for joining us.
Yes,
And,
it does.
hey, you want one of these fine
Thanks a
T-shirts?
lot.
You want one of these fine T-shirts, my friend? Want to be dreaming it, doing it, or fuck the gatekeepers? We'll
Fuck the gatekeepers,
Fuck
I
the, you know, I
guess.
try to clean it up. They all want fuck the gatekeepers, Jake. I got to tell you, I love you folks that you're my kind of crap. Let's change gears a little bit. You know, we could talk about your music all day long, but I think it would be better for you to just go come to everybody's city and play it. As I mentioned at the top, you and I had a chance to talk yesterday. I've talked a lot with your manager, and I'm fascinated and encouraged and inspired by the things you guys have done in your career. But the thing I think I'm most impressed by, Jacob, with you and your manager, is your attitude. You guys are wise beyond your years. And if you're going to be in a band and you want to make this a career, I am absolutely convinced after 35 years that it's about getting your head in the right place to do something great. So I want to play a little clip for you to spark some thought, and then I want to talk about it. Play the clip if you would, D.
Rock bands, there's a 10-year gestation period. 10 years between the time they started making music and the time shit's really going off for them. Think about it. I mean, My Morning Jacket, Modest Mouth, Death Cab for Cutie. Incubus, right? 10 years. 10 years.
Yeah.
And a lot of people get into it, right? Now, let's go. Instant grab. Because they aren't really willing to die for the craft. They want to be a rock star. They don't want to live a rock star. And that's where I see a lot of it is like, a lot of it has to be that no matter what happens, this band or this person's making music, regardless of all the things around it. And ultimately, they will find a level of success if there's talent there.
Thoughts?
Who said that?
Bruce Floor, who's a very wise man, old friend of mine, manager, promoter, record
I'm
company
a fan
guy.
of Bruce Floor, dude. Bruce Floor's a smart guy.
He is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You know, when I see people around me, like I was actually last night with a kid, Nako Bear, who's taken off, and he was at my house and we were doing a song, and I'm seeing him and I'm seeing things happen fast for him, and I'm seeing people realizing quick how great he is. And it worries me a tiny bit because I remember how long it's taken me to get here, how prepared I am to be here. I'm not worried about Nako. Nako's going to be fine. But people in that situation, when I see a friend of mine growing fast, I get a little worried because it should take a long-ass time. You know, you should know exactly why you're doing it. You should know exactly what you sound like. You should know exactly, you know, what your formula is, what works and what doesn't work. At the moment that the thousands or tens of thousands of people start showing up, you got to know all that shit. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
You know what? Over the last 13 years, I wrote it all down. You guys, I think we got a graphic up here. You guys have done 4 full-length albums, a couple EPs, a couple DVDs. For a lot of bands, that's a career's worth of work. And you did it, most of it under the radar. I want you to talk about, you know, everybody starts with a love of music, something that's arguably a hobby. And at some point, it turns into something you want to do for a career. Was there a moment out there that you and your bandmates decided that this is what we want to do for our life's work?
It's funny. My dad always tells me that the show I'll remember the most is the one I did at Whitlow's. I told him the story. I was like, look, you know, we're playing at Whitlow's, and this was a long time ago. And there was 5 people in the band, and we made $1,500. So that means $300 each person. And that was like the first day I realized that I might be able to do this for a living. And that was the most we'd ever been paid for a show, and we could only do that show like once a month, so it's not like it could support us. But I realized if we did this every day, we could do this for a living, and we did that for years. But really, though, I mean, it wasn't until I started figuring out myself, and the band started figuring out who they were, that it started to take off. But by then we were prepared, because we'd played, 5,000 dive bars or 5,000 beach bars or 5,000 college campuses at some dorm or at some frat house, or, you know what I mean? Like, there's people out there who've seen me play in rooms full of 15 people, and half of them are blacked out drunk. And we're playing behind somebody's couch, and I remember that stuff. Like, I don't forget that stuff, and even though now it's much different.
Yeah, it's funny, we talked the other day that some of my fondest memories weren't arriving at the place where I would have thought you called a success. Right. It was all the drama and those character building moments, I called it, that you look back on fondly, that we're all part of this idea of just loving the ride that you're on here, You made a comment for the folks out there, and I say this in that Bruce Floor clip I play frequently, because it was simple but profound in terms of what it takes, to really want to be a musician here. You made an interesting comment in an interview, something to the effect of, if you could imagine doing anything else but music in your life, you should do it. I thought that was an interesting and very wise take on things. Talk about that, if you would.
That's my dad. That's my dad striking again. My dad's a pretty famous guy. He's behind a lot of the ideas for the lyrics. Yeah, well, the point is that you're not going to get to see your family. You're not going to get to see your friends. You're not going to get to start a family. You're not going to get to wake up in the same place every day, go to the same place to sleep every night. And that sounds like, a lot of people are like, wow, you get to travel your whole life. Like, that's amazing. But I mean, until you do it, you don't really realize what goes into it to do, 60 countries in a year. Because there's only so many hours in a day, and there's only so many days in a year, and you start to realize that. And you end up spreading yourself pretty thin sometimes. It's funny, I'm telling you this. You know exactly what I'm talking about.